Hello and welcome back to the sideboard here at Star City Games Worcester in Worcester, Massachusetts. My name is Ruben Bressler and I'm joined by Thomas Enevoldsen.
Hello.
Thomas is a Grand Prix winner in this format with this deck. So who better to talk about Death and Taxes, the format's white weenie deck, than Mr. Enevoldsen here. So you of course have won Grand Prix Strasbourg.
Yep.
Your teammate Michael Bond, who won the Standard Open this morning, also top 4 at that Grand Prix with the same deck.
Yeah, good player.
What makes this deck so powerful?
What makes this deck so powerful? First of all, is it that nobody thinks it's powerful. That's the first thing that makes it powerful. The second thing that makes it powerful is that most decks in Legacy are based on an efficiency principle. Like, everything costs so little mana, and decks are built up to always be able to cast all their spells as efficiently as possible, do it as efficiently as possible with as little mana cost as possible. And this deck preys on that by making them pay more.
Sure.
And in that sense, it kind of makes all of the Legacy decks become sort of glass cannon-y.
Exactly.
Because they
This
just don't
deck,
function like
it
that.
may look like a fair deck, but this deck turns all the other decks into fair decks
Yes,
also, and this is
exactly.
the better fair deck.
It's the much better fair deck.
Now, the most important parts of this deck, I think, are the mana denial and the mana advantage
Certainly,
cards.
certainly.
Very similar to Goblins, how Goblins has Ether Vial and Wasteland and Rishadan Port to be able to gain a mana advantage. But you have additional pieces to get on your mana advantage, and those include Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Most important card in the deck.
And Aven Mind Sensor. So first we'll talk about Thalia.
Yep.
You just said it was the most important card in the deck.
By far.
Why is Thalia so good?
Well, first of all, Brainstorm is the #1 card. Thalia is so good because it reduces Brainstorm's effectiveness so much that all the decks that rely on it just become so much worse, because the difference between 1 and 2 is huge in this format. And not being able to do their things on time, not having the tempo to do things on time. The same with Force of Will, a card you can't play if you're tapped out. That just makes all those cards much less efficient, and such that you get to play your fair game against their much less good game.
Absolutely, yeah. Thalia is very potent in this format.
And
Most decks.
it can attack and block too. It's a first striker, right?
Having first strike is incredibly relevant.
Really important,
It can attack into an insectile aberration, any number of 2/2.
Yeah, all the goblins, for example.
All the goblins. It sits back on defense pretty well. And it's extremely potent at being able to shut down all the cantrips. Most decks don't run any more than 16 creatures.
Nope.
In it. And so the rest of the deck is full of things like Brainstorm, Ponder,
Force
Show
of Will.
and Tell, Force of Will, exactly.
All those cards.
And so Thalia, one of my favorite cards. I'm a big fan.
My favorite card.
I'm a big fan of Maverick, and I'm hoping that deck comes back. Another deck that takes advantage of Thalia. This one, arguably more so.
Yes,
but,
say so.
But very, very powerful nonetheless. Aven Mind Sensor, another pseudo mana denial.
Actually, it's not there as a tax per se. We're very worried about elves, and we're very worried about storm, and anything that like tutors for something. So it's kind of like a catch-all answer that is always going to be relevant against stuff like Stoneforge, against fetch lands, as you said, and other sort of tax.
Right.
All these cards that search out, we kind of want to, because that sometimes leads to unfair things when you search out things.
Absolutely. I was sort of deciding whether or not I wanted to include Aven Mind Sensor in the mana denial plan. It does sort of have that as a secondary thing, but
and it blocks Delver.
Exactly. And there are so many effects in this format that search libraries, from Infernal Tutor to Stoneforge Mystic. It's very important to be able to slow those decks down and make them play fair, just like you're trying to.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's only the opponent, so it doesn't hit our Stoneforge Mystic.
Now, of course, you're using the normal Stoneforge Mystic package of Batterskull and Umezawa's Jite.
Just like all the other fair decks.
Exactly. But on top of yours, you've got creatures that can take advantage of those equipment better than most other people. Chief among them are your flyers, which include Aven Mind Sensor and Flicker Wisp, which we'll get to later, and a double-striking creature, Mirran Crusader. Now, Mirran Crusader is a card that pops up every once in a while. I've never really... It holds a really weird place in this. Why is it so good in this deck?
It replaced Sarah Avenger before GP Strasbourg. We found that with Deathrite Shaman and Abrupt Decay, the protection becomes really important, of course, and also those two cards enable a new sort of deck, the blue, green, black decks.
Right, the bug, bug
which really do not have an answer to this card, but has plenty of answers to Sarah Avenger. So, and it sort of has evasion in the sense that Goyf and Nimble Mongoose and Night of the Reliquary cannot block it. And it just kind of gives this deck also a sort of combo feel, because when you play fair and you're living off the top of your deck, this deck can seem not very powerful.
Sure.
But Mirror Crusader is a sort of combo thing, because along with Umasawa's Jit, you swing in 2 turns, you got lethal. It gives the deck sort of like the combo game that it can take advantage of.
So I was talking about Flicker Wisp. Equipment obviously better on flyers, but Flicker Wisp has a much more important purpose in this deck, which is the namesake of the deck. The deck is called Death and Taxes.
Yes.
And the reason why is sort of lost to mystery.
Probably.
But I think that the story that I originally heard, there are 2 stories. One is that every format has White Weenie in it when this deck first came about. And so there are only 3 things that are inevitable. Death, Taxes, and White Weenie.
Sure.
The other one is that this has such a powerful end game that this is just so inevitable that if you are playing turn after turn after turn, this will grind you out and there's nothing that can stop it. And the main reason why is the interaction between Mangara of Karandor, Time Spiral Legendary Human Wizard, and Caracas.
Yes.
And also with Ether Vial, you can flash in a Flicker Wisp to be able to do the Mangara trick again. So explain the Mangara-Caracas interaction.
Well, the point is that the ability on Mangara says, as you just tap it, that's the cost, and then as part of the ability, you remove both Mangara and the card that you're targeting. The point is that since it's not part of the cost to remove the Mangara, you can respond to the tap ability, and you can bounce it, you can Flicker it with Flicker Wisp, you can do whatever you want to save it from being removed, but that will still not deny the ability to remove the other permanents. And then there's another neat trick that does that. Because of this, if you tap it and remove something like a Battle Skull, and your opponent responds by returning the Battle Skull, then the ability is countered because there's no target, and you don't have to remove Mangara anymore, so you get people like that.
Nice, because there's only 1 target.
Exactly,
Mangara.
and if that card, and it fistles, and then you just bounced it.
I didn't even realize that one. So, very powerful interaction there. And of course, Caracas, one of the best cards in the format.
I mean, so much splash damage with Caracas.
And you can also save your own Thalia on
and
occasion.
that is so important.
A lot of people just don't see that onboard trick happen.
Like a very common scenario in something like Miracles or any other sort of like really grindy control deck, if you have an Aether Vial on 2 and you have a Caracas and you have the Thalia, all of their mass removal or any removal they have just becomes so much worse because you always have that instant speed back again Thalia.
Yeah. And so one of my other favorite cards in this format that very few people play, Mother of Runes.
Mother of Runes.
Extremely potent 1-drop. You have to kill it
severely
on site.
underplayed, I think.
Yes.
So many decks have so much trouble with it because they have to devote so much space to spells that interact with spells. So usually maybe you have like 4 Lightning Bolts, maybe you have 4 Abrupt Decay, you have 4 Swords to Plowshares.
But not much on top
No,
of that.
and like this deck sort of puts those spells on work, like on overtime. So, and Mother of Runes it makes, along with Thalia, makes it so that they can't play 2 maybe in 1 turn. So sometimes it just does that thing, the inevitable thing where there's nothing left for them to do.
Yeah, being able to protect all of your combo pieces, being able to protect,
Mirror Crusader,
even from combat, being able to just stand in combat and prevent damage from a Nimble Mongoose, very important.
Very important.
One last card I want to talk about in the main deck is Phyrexian Revoker. Just a generally good card, a Python Needle that can also deal damage.
Yes, exactly. The point is that there's a lot of really weird things going on in Legacy, and this deck is supposed to have like a very wide attack angle. You have to be able to deal with so many different things. And Phyrexian Revoker is kind of that catch-all answer. That's it. Kind of like Thalia, the 2 cards that are always going to be decent in any matchup because there's always something to take. And it just kind of tries to slow down, especially Planeswalkers is the most important thing probably.
Sure. Being able to shut down Jace.
Yes.
Shut down Liliana.
Exactly, 2 important cards.
We're going to move sort of to the sideboard, although this card is a sideboard card that's in your main deck.
Exactly,
It has so much impact on the game that I think that I can understand why, and that's Fiend Hunter.
Fiend Hunter, exactly.
Legacy playable card Fiend Hunter. Not really a sense
in my
that
opinion,
I thought I would
in my
play.
opinion.
Talk to me about why Fiend Hunter is so good.
Well, I mean, you just gotta watch it as the 5th Source to Plowshares. But the point is that with Aether Vial and with the equipment, the thing that you have a body that you can put it at instant speed is really important. We started it in Strasbourg because we knew that Show and Tell was going to be big. And it's of course really good to put in against Griselbrand, Emrakul. And it's just sort of, we always boarded it in more and more. I even boarded it against Rug Delver just to get their Delvers.
Get their Delvers and Tarmogoyfs.
You just gotta get a little more removal, and this is just the most efficient one we got. We don't want to play Path because we got Thalia, we got the Band of Now plan. It's always there. So we kind of just Fiend Hunter. It's a human. Now we play Cavern of Souls too. We're gonna resolve it. it's a nice card.
Excellent. Yeah, that sort of fits all of the things you want to be doing. You want to have such a wide range that plays
card,
well with all of the other things in your deck.
Flicker Wisp, if you want to reset it. You know.
It does a neat Mangara trick with the Flicker Wisp because of how the layers stack on Fiend Hunter. So that one makes a lot of sense. Two cards that are actually in your sideboard.
Yep.
One of them is Sunlance. Sunlance is a card that a lot of people might not be aware of. It's basically White's Lightning Bolt, and it's very good at taking care of things like Delaware Secrets, taking care of other small creatures like Deathrite Shaman and Grim Lavamancer, things that could be a problem.
Confidant.
Dark Confidant is another very big one.
And it's just like the sixth Source of Plowshares. You know?
Yet another Source of Plowshares. Be able to take out the little guys.
Yes.
Leave room for the big guys.
Yeah, because I mean, Deathrite Shaman.
By big guys, I mean Batterskull.
Yes. Deathrite Shaman in particular has become kind of a problem because it sort of messes with the mana denial plan, so we want to get another answer for that card in particular.
Yeah. And the last one I want to talk about in the sideboard is Wiltleaf Liege.
Yes.
This, I imagine, the king, I imagine is your answer to Liliana of the Veil.
Well, yeah, that's half of its purpose, yeah. The other half is, well, back in my game store, everyone hates this deck, so they all pack Dread Knight whenever. I don't play as much, but when I play for a couple of weeks, they're gonna put back in their Dead of Nights. And you know, people play Engineer, play stuff like that. It's kind of like the card that sort of makes sure that you never randomly lose to this stuff, because you never know if they're bringing them in. And especially against Jund, they have him to Turak, they have Liliana, and this guy, of course, works really well against them.
Absolutely, yeah. Being able to randomly sneak it in, obviously the icing on the cake. Being able to take down Liliana from 4, very important.
And
but
four toughness is pretty decent
it's
in this
much,
match.
It's a much bigger creature than even a Nimble Mongoose.
Exactly.
One of the better ways to deal with that. So this deck, very powerful.
Very powerful.
You're doing well today already.
Yep.
And we can't wait to see you on camera and see how you're doing going forward.
All right, thank you
so much for joining me in the sideboard.
My pleasure.
Thomas Enevoldsen, I am Ruben Bressler here at Star City Games, Worcester.